I couldn't believe it. A letter from my HOA saying my American flag was a community violation. They claimed it was too big, too bright, and that it disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic. I stood there staring at that paper, thinking, since when did loving my country become a problem? At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But when I reached out to the HOA, they didn't back down. They doubled down, threatening daily fines if I didn't take my flag down immediately. That's when I realized this wasn't about a flag. It was about control. And I decided enough was enough.
I've always believed that your home should tell your story. Mine isn't the biggest house in the neighborhood, not by a long shot, but it's the one I poured my heart into. I painted every wall, planted every flower, and built the porch swing myself. Every detail in that place holds a memory. And right out front, standing tall, is my American flag. It's been there since the day I moved in, waving proudly in the morning breeze, catching the light of every sunrise. To me, it's not just decoration. It's a reminder of sacrifice, hard work, and the freedom that makes all of this possible. Neighbors would often nod or smile as they walked by. Some even mentioned how good the flag looked with the way the morning sun hit it. I never once thought it could bother anyone. It was just part of my home, like the oak tree in the yard, or the sound of kids riding bikes down the street. Then one morning, I opened my front door and saw an envelope taped right to it. White, official-looking paper, sealed with the HOA logo at the top. At first, I thought it was something minor, maybe a reminder about trash bins or community parking rules. But when I opened it and started reading, my stomach dropped. Your property is in violation of Section 4.2 Exterior Display Regulations. Please remove the American flag from your front yard immediately. Failure to comply may result in daily fines. I actually laughed out loud at first, thinking it had to be some kind of mistake. A flag violation? That couldn't be real. Maybe someone on the board got confused, or maybe they meant something else. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I reached out. I emailed the HOA office that same day, attaching a photo of the flag, politely asking if there'd been a misunderstanding. I even quoted part of the US flag code, thinking that would clear things up quickly. A few hours later, I got a reply. Short, cold. No greeting, no explanation. Your flag is not in compliance with community aesthetic standards. Please remove it within 10 days to avoid penalties. That's it. No discussion, no reasoning, just an ultimatum. I couldn't believe it. The flag wasn't oversized. It wasn't blocking anything. It wasn't even lit at night, which I later realized was one of their complaints. Still, I replied again, trying to be civil, asking for a conversation. The next day, another message arrived. This time it said, failure to comply will result in daily fines of $100 until the violation is resolved. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the flag at all. This was about control. And I wasn't about to let them win that easily.
After that second letter from the HOA, I started to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power play. They weren't interested in talking. They wanted obedience. At first, I thought maybe I was the only one being targeted. Maybe someone on the board had a personal issue with me or just didn't like the sight of the flag out front. But a few days later, as I was mowing the lawn, I noticed something strange. Across the street, my neighbor Bill, a retired Marine, had taken down his flag. I stopped the mower and walked over. "Hey, Bill, what happened to your flag?" I asked. He sighed, shaking his head. "Got one of those letters last week. They said mine was too high. Said it didn't meet the height limit for poles. I didn't want the hassle, so I just took it down." That hit me harder than I expected. Bill's flag had been flying there for years, long before the current HOA board was even formed. And now it was gone, all because of a few people with too much authority and too little sense. Later that evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood, and what I saw made my stomach turn. House after house, where flags used to wave proudly, the poles were empty. No red, no white, no blue. Just bare metal or green patches of grass where they'd been removed. It wasn't just me. The HOA had gone after everyone. I decided to call the HOA office directly. When I finally got through, they told me the president was available for comments during the next open meeting. I marked it on my calendar. When that day came, I showed up early. The meeting room was in the community clubhouse. Beige walls, stiff folding chairs, and that faint smell of burnt coffee. I sat near the front and waited. When they called my name, I stood up and calmly explained what was happening. I read the letter they sent me, quoted the law that protects the right to display the U.S. flag, and asked one simple question: why? The HOA president, a man named Robert Kent, leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "We must maintain visual harmony in our community. Large flags disrupt that." I stared at him, stunned. "Visual harmony?" I repeated. "You mean freedom looks messy to you?" He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just said, "We have standards for a reason, sir." I left that meeting more furious than ever. I wasn't the kind of person to pick fights, but this wasn't about me anymore. It was about everyone they'd pushed around and intimidated into silence. At night, I couldn't sleep. So around midnight, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing. I wrote a post for our town's Facebook group. I told the whole story: the letters, the fines, the visual harmony comment, and how my neighbors were afraid to fly their own flags. I attached pictures of my flag and a copy of the notice they'd sent me. I didn't expect much to happen. Maybe a few likes, a couple of sympathetic comments. But within an hour, the post started blowing up. People were furious. Some couldn't believe an HOA had the nerve to call the American flag disruptive. Veterans, local families, even folks from nearby towns started sharing it. By morning, my inbox was flooded with messages of support. A few people even sent me screenshots of their own letters from the HOA, saying they'd been too scared to speak out. One message stood out. It was from a woman who worked for a local news station. She asked if I'd be willing to go on record and share my story. I hesitated for a second. I wasn't looking for fame or attention. I just wanted to be treated fairly. But then I thought about Bill and all the others who had quietly taken their flags down because they were afraid. So I said yes. Within a day, a reporter came by. She interviewed me in my front yard, right under the same flag the HOA wanted gone. We talked about the letters, the fines, and the idea of visual harmony. When the interview aired that evening, everything changed. My quiet neighborhood suddenly wasn't so quiet anymore. Cars slowed down in front of my house, honking in support. Neighbors I'd never spoken to came by to shake my hand. Some even started putting their flags back up. It was small at first, just a few here and there, but I could feel something building. The HOA wanted conformity. What they were about to get was a community united. It didn't take long for the story to spread beyond our neighborhood. By the end of that week, the local media had picked it up. The headline read, "Homeowners told to take down American flags, community fights back." The reporter's video clip from my front yard started circulating online. I didn't expect it to reach thousands of people, but it did, and fast. By the next morning, I had voicemails from radio stations, veterans groups, and even one local city council member. It was like the story struck a nerve that had been waiting to be hit.
people started showing up at my house, not to protest, but to thank me. An older man in a Korean war cap came by and said, "I fought for that flag. Don't let them tell you where it can't fly." A young couple down the street brought over coffee and told me they'd put their flag back up that morning. Then the real turning point came. One of the biggest local news stations, Channel 7, ran the story in their evening broadcast. They interviewed more residents, including a few who had taken their flags down out of fear. And just like that, the silence broke. The next morning, I stepped outside, half expecting another nasty notice from the HOA. Instead, I saw something that made my chest tighten with pride. Across the street, Bill's flagpole was standing tall again, the stars and stripes fluttering proudly in the wind. 2 houses down, another flag had gone up, then another. By noon, half the block had joined in. That evening, I walked to the end of the street just to take it all in. Flags, everywhere. Every house on our cul-de-sac had one. Some small, some massive, some lit up beautifully at night. It wasn't planned, it wasn't organized, it just happened. Word spread fast. More houses in nearby streets started flying their flags too. Within days, the entire neighborhood looked like a 4th of July parade. Red, white, and blue as far as you could see. Of course, the HOA didn't stay quiet for long. Their inbox was flooded with angry emails from homeowners and messages from people outside the community condemning their unpatriotic behavior. Their Facebook page, which used to get maybe a dozen likes on their gardening posts, now had thousands of comments. Most of them said the same thing. How dare you tell people they can't fly their flag? This isn't about harmony, it's about control. Even local politicians started weighing in, calling the HOA's actions un-American. The pressure was mounting fast. By the end of the week, the HOA board announced an emergency meeting. I went, along with about 50 other residents. The room was packed, standing room only. You could feel the tension in the air. Robert Kent, the HOA president, looked exhausted. The same man who'd smugly told me about visual harmony just days ago now avoided eye contact. When he finally stood up to speak, he looked like someone who knew the walls were closing in. He cleared his throat and said, "We've heard the concerns of the community. After reviewing our guidelines and considering recent feedback, the board has decided to revise the flag policy to allow displays in compliance with federal standards." Translation? They'd back down. The crowd broke into applause, something I'd never seen in that room before. Even some of the board members looked relieved. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't gloat. I just said, all we ever wanted was to show pride in our country. No rule book should ever take that away. The local reporter who'd broken the story was there too, capturing it all. The footage of that meeting went viral. Within days, national outlets picked it up. Suddenly, our small-town HOA fight had turned into a headline about freedom, pride, and standing up for what's right. As the backlash grew, Robert Kent quietly resigned. The HOA scrubbed their social media pages and issued a public apology, saying they deeply regretted how the situation had been handled. But by then, it didn't matter. The neighborhood had already changed. That weekend, families came out to barbecue together for the first time in months. Kids were riding bikes, flags were flying, and the street felt united. I remember sitting on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the roofs, the flags glowing in the fading light. For once, the neighborhood wasn't divided by rules and threats. It was brought together by something simple and true. The HOA wanted visual harmony. Well, they got it. Just not the kind they expected. The following Monday felt different. The sun rose over the neighborhood, golden light catching on dozens of flags waving proudly in the breeze. The same houses that once looked uniform and lifeless now shimmered with color, movement, and pride. It was a sight that no community guideline could ever design. It was real, human, and free. Word had gotten out that Robert Kent, the HOA president, had officially stepped down. The board released a short, carefully worded statement that read, "We regret the misunderstanding regarding flag displays and apologize to our residents for any distress caused." Misunderstanding. That word made me laugh a little. There was no misunderstanding. They'd been caught, and they knew it. Still, I couldn't deny it. The fight was over.
And for once, the right side had won. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the flags ripple across the block. Kids were playing, neighbors were talking, and for the first time in a long time, there wasn't that tension in the air, that feeling of someone always watching, waiting to hand out a violation notice. One by one, people stopped by to talk. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others admitted they'd been too scared to speak up before. Mrs. Carson from down the street told me, "I took my flag down last year when they warned me. I never thought I'd see the day we could all put them back up again." Her voice cracked a little. I told her, "You're not alone, ma'am. None of us are." Later, as the sun dipped low and the streetlights flickered on, I walked to the edge of the cul-de-sac. Every home, every single one had a flag flying. Some were brand new. Others were old and faded, showing years of weather and history. The breeze carried the faint sound of laughter and conversation. It felt like the community had woken up again, like we'd remembered what it meant to be neighbors, not just residents living under the same set of rules. A local veteran stopped by again, shaking my hand. He said, "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us." I smiled and looked at the rows of flags lining the street. I said quietly, "All I wanted was to fly my flag." Turns out, the whole town wanted to too. And that's the truth of it. The HOA thought they were enforcing order, but what they really did was remind us what unity looks like. Now, every time I see that flag wave outside my home, I don't just think about freedom. I think about standing up, even when it's uncomfortable. I think about how one person speaking up can ripple through an entire town. And as the stars and stripes move gently in the evening wind, I can't help but smile. Because no matter how many rules they write, they'll never silence what that flag stands for.
They tried to take down one flag, but ended up raising an entire community. What would you have done if your HOA told you to take down your flag? And do you think HOAs should have the power to ban the American flag?
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.